So we can go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight and for being here and prioritizing mental health. My name is Karin Broberg, and I am the program coordinator for the In Our Own Voice program at NAMI-NYC, and that is what you are going to be hearing tonight. I wanted to start by giving a really quick introduction about NAMI for those of you who maybe have not joined NAMI programming before. NAMI stands for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and we're the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization. So we provide all sorts of advocacy, education, and support, both for people who are living with mental health challenges themselves, but also for family members and friends. And when you think of, you know, nearly half of all Americans are going to experience mental health challenges at some point during their lifetime, that is a lot of people that we serve here in New York City. I want to share a little bit about the kinds of support that we have in case it's something that would be helpful for anyone in the room. At NAMI-NYC, we offer classes and support groups, again, both for people dealing with mental health issues and for friends and family members. All of our classes and groups are completely free to access, and they're accessible either over Zoom, like we are tonight, or in person. We have an office in Midtown Manhattan. All of our services are free, like I mentioned. They are also peer-led. So that's something important to mention about NAMI. We're a peer-focused organization. And what that basically means is just that if you attend a support group or a class that is for people living with a mental health condition, it's going to be led by someone who also lives with that condition. And if you're attending a class or a support group for family members, it'll be led by someone who's a family member themselves. So it's just important for us. We want to make sure that when someone reaches out to us for support, that they're met by someone who can really understand and empathize with what they're going through. I'm going to go ahead and put into the chat the link to our website. Our website is naminyc.org, and at that website you can find all the information about the different classes, programs, events, everything that we offer. We have over 40 different support groups, for example, so whatever you may be struggling with, we are likely to have a group that can help you with that. We also have a really fantastic phone helpline that you can call Monday to Friday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And our helpline can help, share about the different services NAMI offers. They can also direct and advise to different services in the city. If you're looking for a therapist or for mental health support, they can help with that. And of course, they're also there if you just need someone to talk to. So warmly recommend reaching out to our helpline for support. So in terms of what we'll be doing tonight, In Our Own Voice is a public presentation where two volunteers who live with mental health issues share their mental health journeys. And the purpose of our time tonight is really to destigmatize this conversation, right? We want to make sure that we open up space to talk about our mental health. Again, so many Americans live with mental health challenges every day, but there's still a lot of stigma and misconceptions that exist around what that means. So, we appreciate all of you for joining us tonight, and we're so excited to be sharing this space with you. I think that is all that I have to say. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to our wonderful presenters. I think starting with Anne.
Hi. So a little bit about me. My name is Anne, and I am 57 years old. I live in Lower Westchester. Some of the things that I enjoy is hiking. I love walking, pretty much anything outdoors. Love dogs. Don't have one at the moment, but I do love them. I come from a large family, and I have a lot of friendships from my childhood, so I consider myself very fortunate. I love to travel. I've done quite a bit of it. And some of my hobbies also include personal growth. And I do a lot of learning on my job. So that's something I really do enjoy. So that's a little bit about me. We're going to get into other segments in a little bit. But for now, I'm going to give you my co-presenter, Sonja, so she could introduce herself and tell you a little bit about herself.
All right, thank you. My name is Sonja. I am originally from Australia. This will be my 16th year living in New York. I really love New York. One of the things I love about New Yorkers is they say what they think and they think what they say. They're very straightforward. And Australians tend to be polite to your face, but say what they really think when you turn your back, which I think is incredibly rude. I'm much more straightforward myself, so I function a lot better here than I ever did living in Australia. I also like outdoors, hiking, swimming, camping, and all that sort of stuff. I don't like winters of New York. I had no idea that it could be so hot and also so cold in the same place. I'd never experienced that before in my life. And every winter, as soon as it's over, I forget it ever existed. I am currently, I started a business during COVID. I started a dog walking business. I also love dogs. I don't currently also have a dog of my own, but I'm taking care of a lot of other people's dogs, and it's the best everything: exercise, therapy, mental, physical, and it's just helped me immensely. So I'm really glad to have been able to do that. So the presentation is broken up into 3 sections. It's what happened, what helps, and what's next. Anne will tell her story, and then I will tell mine. And then we'll go over to you guys. If you have any questions for us or anything you'd like to share, please feel free. If you want to ask questions or share anonymously, you can send a direct message to either Karen or Jen, and they will read it out for you. The presentation starts off a little heavy with some dark days, but it gets a little bit lighter as we go along. So just bear with us. And I look forward to presenting for you guys. And I'm going to pass you back over to Anne for what happened.
Thanks. Okay, so for me, back in 2011, at the age of 44, I had some major crises that came up, and they referred to it later as like a trifecta. I had a lot of stress at home. My husband at the time had a business, and there was downward market, and he was financially, it was difficult. So I was carrying us financially, and my job had a lot of change. The management had a lot of my management had left, and the parent company came in, and we were outsourcing to another country. I was heading it up across the country in various offices, and it became a lot. It became more than what I really bargained for. So after being with the organization 22 years, I just knew my mental health started presenting itself. I didn't recognize it at the time. I could not have told you it was mental health. I could tell you that it was a lot of anxiety. My sleep started taking a really bad hit, and I was waking up earlier and earlier every day. I found I was overstimulated all the time. I couldn't focus. I couldn't get my thoughts together, and speaking endlessly, like I was just chatting, and just a lot of things that I saw my personality was changing, and very anxious. So I decided that I really needed to take the severance package that they were offering at my organization, because I knew I was not doing well. So I spoke to my husband at the time, and he did not support that decision. So the stress got exasperated, because now I have marital problems on top of it. And I was in the start of my menopause along with that. So what happened was I became very insecure. I was very distrust. I didn't trust many different factors that started presenting itself. And so I eventually did take the severance package, and I was very grateful for that. And the home front, things did not get better. My husband at the time just put more and more distance, and it made me more and more insecure. And instead of getting me help, I suffered quite a bit. I went some point over a week of not sleeping, and my stepchildren were visiting one day, and I guess, well, I know they did, but they got me hospitalized. And after a 2-week hospitalization and a diagnosis of bipolar, my journey with a mental health condition began. So at 44 was a little bit much to take that in. But so for me, one of the things I do want to say before I hand it back over is, in hindsight, my diagnosis was bipolar, but had there been an earlier diagnosis in my childhood, there was definitely signs of like an ADHD. I was very hyperactive, had a very hard time under a lot of stress with school. I went to college later in life. I really, really had to put like a lot of work. I had to get substitutes and really work on those skill sets. They didn't come so naturally to me. So in hindsight, I would, and it is something that my psychiatrists and doctors do believe that there would have been an earlier diagnosis, but my diagnosis was bipolar. So that started my journey with my mental health. And for now, I'm going to give you back over to my co-presenter.
Thank you so much, Anne. I'm also hearing Anne's story for the first time, so it was very good. Thank you very much. So for me, I was born into an abusive family. I'm the middle child of 3 girls. And for some reason or another, my father, who was the main abuser, focused on me. I can only sort of speculate as to why that was. And the only reason I can think of it is that my mother was very passive and she stood by her husband. And my 2 sisters also joined and just went along with everything that he said, whereas I was the only one putting my hand up and saying that there's something wrong with our family. And in turn, I became the problem. And I grew up being constantly told by my whole family that there was something wrong with me, that I was born wrong, that everybody hated me, they wished I were never born, and much worse than that. But when I started school, I started when I was 4 years old. I thought that at 4, I thought I'll start school, I'll make friends my own age, and they will be my support network, and whatever's happening at home won't matter anymore. But because of being taught how to be afraid of people who are supposed to care for me and love me, when I started school and when kids were nice to me, I would react with absolute terror. Like I was terrified that they were only being nice so that they could then harm me in some way or another. Because I was physically and mentally abused at home. I just thought that was what was going to happen at school. So needless to say, I didn't make friends, but I was bullied from the moment I started school all the way through to when I graduated from high school. But I promised myself that when I was young that I would make it to the age of 18, because 18 is an adult in Australia. And once I make it to 18, my life will be mine, and all this stuff that's happened won't matter anymore because I'll be in charge. And I made it to 18 and I ran at it. I traveled to the US for the first time when I was 17, right before I turned 18. I thought, and I organized the whole trip myself, passport and everything. I thought, wow, I'm so great at being an adult. Adulthood's going to be fantastic. So I did that. I went to university. I studied performance. I figured the only problem I had from my childhood was that I didn't know how to make friends. So I studied performance. I thought, well, if I'm a social outcast, that's where all the social outcasts and weirdos go. Maybe they're my peoples, and I'll make friends, and everything will be fine. So I did that, and for 3 years I wasn't bullied. So I thought that's pretty good. And then I decided to work in television. I don't know if anyone's ever worked in television before, but it's like being in high school. And I found myself being bullied all over again, except now I'm in my mid-20s. I'm supposed to have left that behind in my childhood. It's not meant to be happening again, but it is. And it's so much worse because I really have no idea why it's happening. And I don't think I knew why it was happening in the first place when I was a child either. So things started to fall apart. All that stuff I told myself, that, how great it was going to be an adult and how in charge and how strong and all that sort of stuff I was going to be, it all started to just crack and fall apart. And I was being bullied in my job as well. So, and I didn't deal with it very well. So I decided that the next thing I'm going to do is move to New York City. Because if I'm such a weirdo, surely I cannot be the weirdest person in New York, which is entirely true. And I love that. But how do I get there? I have to move back to my parents' house to save money. Again, I look back and I can see that I really had no idea how bad my upbringing had been. So I moved back to my parents' house for a year before I moved here and I found myself being treated like a child, the way they had treated me as a child. You know, there's something wrong with you, you're worthless, and all that sort of stuff all over again. And whatever I was doing to keep myself together just completely fell apart, and I blacked out and I shut down. But the fun part was I drove my car. I got in a car and I drove, and I had no idea that I was driving. And I drove to a liquor store. I bought a bottle of vodka. I drove back to my parents' house, went inside to get orange juice for my vodka. I have no idea that I did this. My mum, the only reason I know is because my mum told me that I'd done this. And so she knew that I was doing something dangerous. And so years later, I asked her, like, why didn't you help me? You could have taken my keys from me. You could have gotten in your car and followed me. You could have called me on my phone at some point to see if I was okay. But she didn't do any of those things. And she said it's because she was upset about an argument that we'd had. But unfortunately, I ended up having a car accident and ended up in jail. But my mum was concerned about her hurt feelings rather than me doing something dangerous. So that's a little bit about what happened to me.
A question in the chat here. Thank you for sharing your stories. It's very courageous. And then the question was, what does stigma mean for you two?
That's interesting because when I was a kid, like none of this really was ever talked about or really existed. So I had no idea also what my experiences were, that they were really different to anyone else's either. I don't think I experienced stigma because I didn't know that what I was experiencing was, as I said, different, or that there was anything really that I knew there was something wrong, but not that wrong that, and I also tried to speak to doctors and other people when I was a kid, and no one would listen to me or believe anything I said. So I never even got to get to have a problem with a stigma or anything like that. But as I've gotten older, I've known that there's a lot of people who really want to talk about this sort of stuff, but are afraid to because of stigma. Whereas I guess growing up without that barrier, I've always been able to talk about this stuff without any fear of anything like that. Really, really through ignorance, I guess.
That's a good point. I guess that is also in some ways part of the stigma, right? People growing up without access to mental health tools and resources and the language to talk about it. We often talk about that in NAMI as, that is in itself kind of part of the stigma too, that people, if you don't have the language to talk about what you're going through, it's much harder to do so.
So a little bit about what helps or what has helped for me was learning to really get to know my diagnosis. Slowing down was the hardest thing for me. I've always been a doer. I've always overdone. Work-life balance was definitely it's a trigger for me. Identifying my triggers, staying very close to my triggers. I've gotten very educated about my mental illness and what my triggers are. I keep a list of them. I actually type them out so that when I have triggers that are what I call a yellow zone before they get to the red zone, I have them typed up, and I also have what helps to mitigate those. And I have a morning routine. 2 years ago, I had a second hospitalization, and I was under a lot of stress at a job in New York, and I saw it coming. I saw the stress. I started having the anxiety. Some of the things that were triggering the first time that I could not identify with, I could identify with. And I did reach out to my sister, and she is a nurse. She came over, and I went for an evaluation, and I did get hospitalized. I was in ER for 2 days, which really exasperated it. But so what helps for me is knowing who that network is and who that network is not. So that's really important. The slowing down, managing stress, leaving capacity in my life. So what that looks like is I don't fill my days where I have no capacity in my days. I have capacity every day because whatever may come, what kind of what kind of day I'm having, what kind of stress I'm having with work, family situations, whatever it might be. So I leave some room for that so that I take care of me. I was always the one that put the oxygen mask on everybody else, and I forgot that I existed. I no longer forget that Anne exists. And one of the parts about stigma for me is taking and having a voice and being sure that I walk the walk, I talk the talk, and I do everything I possibly can. Doesn't mean I won't have another hospitalization. Doesn't mean my mental health is cured. It's not. I'm on medication. I'm on minimal. It's gotten lower and lower as I've gotten therapy. Therapy has been probably my saving grace for the last 2 years. Therapy for me is venting out, venting through situations, whether it be work situations, family situations, how my mom can't talk about my illness, which is fine because I can't talk to my mom, but I have my other resources. So my therapy really keeps me it keeps me in the moment. It really keeps me in the present. I do a lot of the volunteer work I do at NAMI is because I'm passionate about mental health. I'm passionate about breaking the stigma. I'm passionate about taking care of me and being the best version I can with mental illness that, it's not that I'm going to wake up and it's going to be gone. It hasn't happened. It's not going to happen. But I am the best version of me. And matter of fact, I've probably a better version of me than I've ever been because I didn't know that I had mental illness that now, as is bipolar diagnosed. So for me, those are the things that I do. And I feel, I'm uniquely gifted, but I'm that much more aware of myself because of it. So for me, that's in a nutshell what helps me.
Thank you so much, Anne. A lot of good things to think about there. For me, so I moved to New York, to the other side of the world, to get as far away from my family as I possibly could. Probably the best thing that I ever did, and also didn't really do as much as I'd hoped it would. I did need the distance because it helped me with perspective. But what I actually ended up doing for the first 5 years when I arrived here is I basically recreated the world that I'd left. And I surrounded myself with people who I thought were my friends, who cared about me, my support network. I thought I finally had it. But what I'd actually done is surrounded myself by people who were just like my family, and ultimately turned out to be quite nasty and not particularly kind people. And in 2013, 5 years after I arrived, I did my last attempt at taking my life that should have worked, but didn't. And so I thought, well, I'm still here. There's something else. There's something very wrong that I need to address, and I need to work out what that is. And so I took a few years of a deep dive to find out what the problem really was. And I realized that I was actually now the problem. I'm not the problem that my family had always told me I was. I was my own problem, because what they'd been doing to me back in Australia, I was now doing to myself. And I was so good at it, I didn't even know I was doing it. I was harming myself and telling myself that I was worthless and useless and shouldn't be here anymore. And I was really good at it. And so I had to start to change all that sort of stuff. And changing perspective is really the only thing that really helped me to get unstuck in that loop. And I thought at first changing perspective had to be a huge leap. I had to completely think the opposite to what I'd previously been thinking, which isn't true. I just had to slightly adjust my perspective. And I went from, seeing I'm not okay, there's something wrong with me, to thinking, no, actually, I was actually fine. It's my family who were the problem, and then they gave me their problem. It wasn't a problem that I started out in life with. It's something that was given to me over time, and then I turned it into my own problem. And so I started to see things like that, and realized that it was never mine to begin with. So I was able to start to separate myself, because I'd actually been diagnosed eventually with PTSD, which is what had happened the night that I had the car accident. I had my first PTSD episode, and I would subsequently experience multiples of those, but smaller versions. And knowing that that's what it was happening, was that I was having PTSD episodes, was a huge help, because I knew what it was and what was happening to me now, and I could do something about it. I also learned to laugh at myself. I wouldn't say laughter is the best medicine or anything like that, but it feels really good to be able to laugh at myself. At first I thought I'd be betraying my experiences, but I'm not doing that. I know them and I know them well. I don't need to just keep thinking of them in the same way. And learning to laugh at myself actually gave me a different way to think, another path to think down, another volume, another speed to think about myself in, which was very useful. And I learned to like myself, and I started to realize over time that I was, instead of hurting myself, that I was actually starting to really help myself. And my goal was always to get to be the person that I see myself, that I was born as, the person that I started out in life, and to regrow that person into an adult, because that person had been left behind in my childhood. So, and I wanted to put the one that I grown into, the one with PTSD, the one, you know, who's reliving abuse. I wanted that person to get sort of put, you know, wrapped up in a blanket and put in a nice, warm, cozy place where she belongs, and not to be in charge anymore. And over time, slowly, that's started to be what's happened. I'm not saying I'm through it all. I've still got a ways to go. I've still got a bit of work to do, but I definitely feel like I've come a long way, even from like 2 years ago, that I can look back and see that I've actually come quite far. So work in progress, still going, but things are a lot better than they used to be, that's for sure.
So for what's next, I really would like to think that I could mitigate future hospitalization, and I hope a day at a time that, doing journaling, doing therapy, doing all the things that, I embrace with my mental health to improve, and get past. I must say that Sonja brought up a point about about the trauma, and it really is. My first episode, when I had the second one that was coming, it came with such a force because it came with a recall. And that's the thing that really had me stand back, was that I was reliving what had happened, and the fear, the anxiety, all of the things that came up. Like it was fast and furious how quickly it happened. And one of the things that I've, through therapy and continued therapy, is to talk through and work through so that that recall gets mitigated and I stop it. What you were just talking about, Sonja, was, to me, what I hear in that is taking the power out of things, or taking the power out of a recording. And has got so much power in when you step back and you take a look at things and you say, I've worked really hard, I keep working at it. So for me, it is just continuing to do all of the things and all of the tools. My toolbox keeps getting built, and that toolbox keeps getting reinforced. And I know with NAMI and doing the volunteer work, staying close to it, I'm starting DBT therapy, which is a 16-week therapy that I start in 2 weeks. These are all the things, because really that work-life balance is a real critical component for me. And I've stepped back in my career. I've literally stepped back so that I don't get into that danger zone. And it's helped me a lot. I do want to get involved with awareness with HR departments. It's something I feel passionate about. And I've been very fortunate in my career that I hope to take some of that awareness to, just advocate where I can, getting rid of the stigma. So I want to have acceptance of where I'm at with my mental health, explore new medications as they come out, that better health. I would like to have better nutrition. So stabilizing my medication and continue to have hope. I really have a lot of hope for being the best version of who I am, and I want to stay on that journey. So for me, that is it. I am so grateful to be here and to hear Sonja and just everybody in your questions and your experiences. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed listening to your story also. Yeah, so for me, what's happening right now is also my what's next. So when I was a kid, I knew that I was going to live a life where I had absolutely no control over what was going to happen to me growing up. And so I promised myself when I was 7 years old that I was going to write a book about my experiences. And I started writing it back in 2015 when I started doing NAMI, the Inner Own Voice presentations. And it was actually all about, my childhood, my abusive childhood. But as I've gone along and I've started to get better, I've started to realize that although it is important to include my childhood, I feel like there's a lot of books about abusive childhoods, but not so many about how we get through it and how we come out the other side. And so I've started writing more about my life since I arrived in New York, and how I've sort of had to take charge and really be brutally honest with myself and realize that I was the real problem that I was having as an adult, and moving and, taking big leaps, not helpful at all. It was, taking a step back more than anything and having a really good look at myself was really what helped me the most. And just getting better at laughing at myself has been amazing. But my main goal after my own mental health is that I want this to be a conversation. I want people to just, instead of having to make an appointment, always having to see a professional and things like that, that we can stop and talk to each other and say, how's your day? And you can go, oh, I'm having a bad day. And then somebody says, oh, okay. And then you just have a little chat about it, and it's not this huge weight, and it doesn't make people run a mile away from you. It's just a simple everyday conversation that we have, and it's just becomes our part of our normal everyday lives. That's what my hope for mental health is, and my goal is to work towards that as a greater community. Yeah, and just I think I'm all right, and I think that being being all right is probably the best way I can be. Being great is fine, but very difficult to maintain. So being okay is probably the best way for me to be. And that's about it. Thank you
Yes,
for coming,
thank
everybody.
you. Yes, thank you to everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Much appreciate everyone coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.